Hi, everybody. Welcome to our podcast for part-time instructors. I'm Elliott Ingersoll, chair of the CASL department, here with
Kathy McCluskey, senior faculty also in the CASL department in counseling.
Yes, and our intern practicum coordinator.
Correct.
So we're going to try to make this as fun as we can, but we thought this would be a good way to reach out and make sure that everyone was on the same page. And with part-time instruction, you will get a packet, sometimes with your contract, sometimes afterward, from Ms. Durda, one of our administrative assistants. But we wanted to do this podcast because there have been so many new changes that have to do with our accrediting body, CACREP, the Counseling for the Accreditation of Counseling and Education-Related Programs, that we thought we'd share them within this podcast. And this comes with some PowerPoints that you might be watching us on YouTube. We're doing on audio video for that. Or you might just be listening and looking at the PowerPoints on your own as we go through this. Also, we're going to try to throw in an incentive here. At the end of the podcast, I'm going to give you a code. You email me the code, and that tells me, A, you listen to the podcast, and B, we're going to put your name in a parking lottery. Every semester, we're going to do a parking lottery where you save your receipts from parking for that semester, and then I reimburse you at the end of the semester if you're the winner of that lottery. So we have a fun prize tied in here. We were hoping to give away a car or two, but that fell through. Anyway, so having said that, let me start with some introductory materials here. I already talked about the written materials you'll get, and do please read them because they talk to you about how to get AV equipment, policies about changing rooms. It's not terribly onerous, but it is important to read. We also want to start, many of you listening to this have been teaching for us for years, and we cannot thank you enough. We know the pay is not much, but we know the level of dedication you've given to our students has just been extraordinary.
Yes, our students speak very highly of the part-time instructors, and each of you are coming in with a set of skills and experience that complement what the rest of us are bringing to the students. So thank you very much.
And I think even more so in my position, I haven't seen clients now for like 4 years, so you're actually far more immersed in the clinical realities than I am, and that is exactly what our students need. We also want to remind you at the end of the spring semester, we always have a part-timer banquet, and we hope that you can join us each year for that. And we give out Part-Timer of the Year awards and some of our scholarships at that banquet also. So let's talk a little bit about CACREP. I said we're doing this orientation for part-time instructors because we needed a little more uniformity in the presentation of course material, and that was feedback we got from the CACREP team. I think that's fair, do you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So the orientation is one of the required standards for CACREP. They're like, well, how do you orient your part-timers? And we thought, well, this is a nice, you could do this, listen in your car, you could watch it at home. This seemed like a flexible medium, so that's why we're trying it out. I think most of you know this, but the pay rate for part-time instructors is set by the university. It's approximately $1,000 per credit hour. However, where a part-timer agrees to accept overload students, that would be 4 or more over the 28 student cap for like a lecture course, we are able to arrange additional pay up to another $1,000. So we're not saying you should have big courses, but should you get a course of 32 students, you will be compensated for that. Next, we want to touch on academic freedom, something that people say is under assault, other people say is unnecessary, other people have never even heard the phrase. The idea, of course, is that what you're talking about in the classroom, as long as it's relevant to the content of the course, you know, as the expert, you are free to share your experiences and perspectives. But in terms of things like the syllabus, the textbook, part-timers do not have full academic freedom because we have, again, because of CACREP, set the syllabus a certain way and use certain textbooks. And that's important because a lot of the CACREP standards are represented in readings from those books. right?
Exactly. And the other thing I would say about academic freedom is that the full-time faculty are just as much responsible for adhering to the KCREP standards as the part-time faculty are. So where creativity can come in and where academic freedom can come in is in the way that you're presenting the material, not the content itself, but the different mechanisms that you're using for disseminating the information and giving students an opportunity to learn that content.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We do, like Kathy said, we appreciate the individual styles of our part-timers as long as they stay with the faculty-designed syllabus. When you agree to teach a course now, and we've been doing this, I think we've always done it for newer instructors and perhaps not as formally for ones who are more experienced, but we'll always assign you a full-time mentor/consultant faculty member. And that person is just someone, if you're a seasoned professional who's been with us for years, just someone that you can bounce ideas off of, brainstorm problematic situations with. And of course, we do have concern conferences from time to time, and your consulting faculty member can be part of those concern conferences.
And I think, for the most part, I think, Elliott, you try to assign faculty mentors who are familiar with the courses that the part-time instructor is teaching, right? So whoever the faculty mentor is going to be somebody who has familiarity with the content of the course that you're teaching.
Yeah, that's really important. And that person, if you're new, they'll supply you with PowerPoints that they've used, lecture notes. We really do want to support you in any way we can. So that's an important part of that relationship. What we're going to start doing now is you'll get a syllabus, and there'll be like a red stamp that says KCREP 2016 standards. So that'll be how you know that this is the most updated syllabus. And again, we are asking you to go with the syllabus as is, to not make changes in it, because it's tied directly to the standards that we are required to meet for KCREP. Now, as far as books go, in most cases, a book has already been ordered for your course. We have to do that like a half a year in advance. If there has not been an instructor assigned, our staff will use the faculty-approved textbook, and that'll just be in the bookstore. If that's the case, Ms. Henley, one of our administrative assistants, she will get you a desk copy of the book for use in the course. So just check with her, and we'll get it to you as quick as we can. If for some reason you might have a course that has no book, just check with your consulting faculty member, and it may be a mistake was made, one was not ordered, or it may be like, for example, theories of personality. I teach using handouts of different articles, chapters, and readings. And do you use a book for internship?
No.
No. So internship, there's probably not going to be a book.
Right.
And by the way, for those people who are teaching internship, we will cover some specifics at that toward the end of the podcast. Key things about the syllabus that you are going to get from us is, the main thing is you hand it out in the first class and don't change it. That's really the biggest thing. It's kind of a contract between yourself and the students, and you want to hold to it consistently. If you, like, for example, I knew a part-timer years ago who made a lot of changes in the syllabus, and then at the end of the semester, he was just hit with a flurry of grade disputes because people were saying, well, he didn't stick to the assignment and he didn't give us an updated syllabus. And some people thought they were treated differently than others. It was a real mess. So just please stay with the syllabus that we give you. But if you have questions about it or you want to discuss it, you can talk to me, Kathy, or any of the other faculty who might be your consulting faculty member.
I want to say one other thing about changing the syllabus. So there might be an occasion where the university is closed because of weather, or there's some other emergent thing that happens that affects your teaching schedule. And it's fine for you to rearrange the topics or to do some other things. The thing that you can't change is the content and the way that the content ties in with specific KCREP standards, because we're counting on that particular course to be covering these particular standards that have been specified on the syllabus.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because you can come in and it'll be 70 degrees and then you'll have a snowstorm and all bets are off.
Right, and then you have to do some rearranging of the schedule to make sure that content gets folded into the course somewhere else, and that the standards are being covered.
Yeah. We have 2 offices that offer accommodations for students. The Office of Institutional Equity and more often the Office of Disability Services. So if a student has accommodations, you will get an official email from either the Office of Disability Services or the Office of Institutional Equity, and that email will convey the sorts of accommodations that they're asking you to provide for the student. We cannot stress enough, if you have any questions about those, talk to me or Kathy or your consulting faculty member. And I think the other thing, Rachel Lutner, who is our head of the Office of Institutional Equity, she's pointed this out. If an accommodation is really not possible, then you talk to them and they'll work something that is possible. I've found them to be actually very flexible and creative. Mm-hmm. But for some courses like internship, you can't be missing 5 courses. You've got to be there for the supervision.
Right.
Yeah, so most of the accommodations come from the Office of Disability Services, but any accommodation that overlaps with what they call Title IX issues, those will come from the Office of Institutional Equity. So let's talk about exams. We all love exams, right?
Yes.
Who doesn't? We ask for a content course, like if you're teaching Intro to Career Development or Psychopathology, or even a mix of content process course like group counseling. We ask that you have at least one closed book, closed note, multiple choice exam. And you have short answer too. There's a couple of reasons. The biggest is that the licensure tests that our students are going to take, the NCE and the OAE, are just all multiple choice. So we want them to have practice taking multiple choice exams in each of the content areas that you may be teaching. If you would like us to help you create items that mirror those that you would see on the NCE or OAE, again, myself, Kathy, any of the consulting faculty are more than happy to help you do that. And of course, we'll share exams that we have given.
Also, a lot of the textbook companies provide a test bank of items that correspond to chapters in the book. So you might be able to find some stimulus items for your exams that way too, by going back into the website that goes with your textbook.
Yeah. And again, just think of it as practice for the students. There have been different faculty over the years, I'm thinking like 15 years ago, where like people wouldn't give any exams, and then they'd get to a course like psychopathology or psychopharmacology, and all of a sudden they're freaking out because they have exams. We want the students to be comfortable with the exam process so that when they do get to that high stakes licensure exam, they've had some warm up for it. We recommend using a curve. Because our exams can't be normed on a population, you can only norm it on the students taking it at that particular time. So Kathy and I recommend an item analysis curve, and it's pretty simple. It just means if more than half of the students miss an item, you throw that item out and everyone gets the points. Is that how you do it?
Yeah.
And ironically, that could mean in a 30-point exam, someone gets 32. They get some bonus points, but we don't want to punish someone because they got a really hard item correct. It usually just means maybe the topic wasn't covered in the way the item was written, or it was just a bad item, and that happens, so we just throw it out. So this is, again, it's not grade inflation, but it is just a way to norm the test within the class. But you will see most of your grade distributions will have a negative skew because we're not dealing with a general sample. These are people who already got one university degree, and so you would expect more people to do well than poorly based on their academic history. Emergency absences will happen. If you're dealing with an emergency or an illness and you need to cancel class, just please let me know. That goes to me, the department chairperson. And, if there's an important topic and one of us is free, sometimes we can cover for you. If not, as Kathy said, you can just readjust where the content's going to be covered. From time to time, you may get contacted by one of our graduate assistants asking for some data from your course. This is related to our CACREP assessment plan. Because students' success on certain assignments reflects success with a competency that CACREP set, we are asked to collate that data, and so it will not be anything complex on your end. It'll just be the GA saying, could you please send me the list of grades for this assignment on this syllabus. Mm-hmm. That's how we've been doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, we're going to take a short break, and if you're teaching anything other than prac or internship, you can tune out. But before you tune out, here is your parking lottery code. S as in Sam, 6488NP as in Neurolinguistic Programming. Mail me that code and email me that code, and we will put your name in the parking lottery. Thank you again for listening, and for those of you not teaching prac or internship, we will see you in the classroom.
Thanks so much for teaching for us, and look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, how about prac and internship?
Okay, prac and internship is okay. So the practicum and internship courses are content focused, of course, like the other courses in the program. But in these particular courses, my sense is that the process piece is probably the more important of the two. So Elliott and I thought that we would take a little bit of time to talk some about the content aspects that are important for coverage, and then also we'll talk some about some of the types of process issues and concerns that pretty commonly come up in internship. Okay, first of all, internship is a 2-semester experience, and everybody needs to stay in the same section for spring semester that they begin with in the fall. There are a couple of reasons for this. One of the biggest ones is that by the end of fall semester, there is some group cohesion that's happening and some relationship development that's happening within the internship group, and it's really important for continuity of the group process to keep them together. There also is a concern. It's a smaller one, but there have been times when an internship instructor has been trying to set some limits with a student or establishing some pretty clear behavioral expectations for performance, and then the student, as a way of maybe avoiding having to meet those expectations or for some other reason, tries to wiggle out of that by getting into another section. And we want to make sure that there is absolute consistency amongst us and between us as well. So we don't permit students to move sections of internship.
Yeah, that is really important. And if you haven't taught prac or internship with us, we will provide you with, what do we call it? It's a interpersonal rubric, or a rubric for professionalism.
It's the professional disposition rubric that's attached to every syllabus in the course that lays out the minimum behavioral expectations across those 8 non-academic areas that are so important for counseling performance.
Yeah, like I shouldn't show up to meet a client in really short cutoffs.
Right.
Ever. Right?
Exactly.
So professionalism.
That would be a rating of a 0 or a 1 out of 3.
Depending on how short they were for me. But that rubric is used throughout the program too. So students know from the first course, the lab, that these are also important things they will be evaluated on.
Right. Yeah, that should not be new information for them, because they get those same rubrics are attached to every single syllabus in the program.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the paperwork first and sort of get that out of the way.
So this is like part of the content stuff.
Oh yes, thank you. So this is the paperwork aspect of content. So when people come to class on the first night, there are several pieces of paper that they need to have completed. The most important one for me is the site placement information form. So, oh, and by the way, all of these forms can be located at the bottom of the practicum and internship website pages. We've included links for those on this slide of the PowerPoint. So the 3 forms that need to be done by the time they come to class on the first night are that site placement information form, the learning contract, which is signed by the site supervisor, and the insurance verification form indicating that they have secured their own malpractice coverage in addition to whatever is being provided by their placement site.
And for example, what should an instructor do if a student does not have those forms completed?
if they don't have them completed, sometimes it might be that the site supervisor wasn't able to sign the learning contract, or sometimes they don't have all of that information yet for the site placement. But they need to, if they don't have them on the first night, they absolutely need to get them to you as soon as possible. I usually permit students to just take a photo of that paper and text it to me or email it to me, rather than waiting until coming to class the next week for the hard copy, because we need information about where each of our students are and who they're working with as soon as possible, just from a liability perspective, and also for us to just be as informed as we can about, who's out there doing what, representing our program.
Yeah, and the standards require that, for practicum and for internship, the clinical counseling students have to be supervised by a PCC with the supervision endorsement. And school counseling students have to be supervised by a school counselor with 2 years experience, right?
Correct.
And that would be on the learning contract and the site placement information form.
Yes, so there's a line right on there where the site supervisor has to sign, indicating that they verify that they meet these credentialing requirements. All right, so moving past the paperwork stuff now. Well, one other thing I want to say about paperwork before we move on, it's not forms exactly, but on the syllabus for practicum and internship, we've laid out a suggested format for students to do the critiques that accompany their recordings. And if there are some things that you would like to add or modify on those critiques, that's not a problem at all. You're welcome to do that. Sometimes we have internship instructors with a particular theoretical orientation or background in training that they want to teach students by adding some pieces to the critique, and that's absolutely fine to do that. So moving on now to the clinical topics. So the kinds of things that students come in talking about on internship, and the things that they end up learning in internship, often are not what people would expect at first. So I think they come into class expecting that they're going to learn how to apply technique A to problem B to get to problem solution C. And we know as seasoned clinicians and counselors that that's not really how this works the vast majority of the time. So on the first night of class, well, actually the first several weeks of class, they're going to be talking a lot about some of their new cases, and in the process of talking about the cases, you can have them start to think a little bit about some theories that they learned in their theories class and how to apply a particular theory framework to understanding a client issue. We also, another topic that comes up a lot is comparing and contrasting different types of techniques and strategies, managing paperwork, figuring out a way to keep track of what documentation is due when for parts of record keeping, and also establishing relationships with clients. I think students are often really surprised by how long it takes to really establish good therapeutic rapport with their clients. And so the interns are often really eager to get right in a first or second session and start working on the problem right away, without recognizing that relationship and trust development piece often takes many, many sessions. And I think for the interns, often it's a relief to realize that they can just hang out and use their active listening skills and really start to become more familiar with the client and what their situation is, and really start to establish some meaningful rapport. So the process piece is, for me, I think the most important aspect of the practicum and internship. And in the process, what we're really talking about is that your students are going to come in. It doesn't matter whether it's practicum or internship. They typically come into class with a very high level of performance anxiety and some deep questions about whether they really have what it takes to do this job. And so but they often don't come out and say that in quite that way, so it shows up in other ways. Sometimes they sit in the internship group and they might look sort of distracted, or they ask some questions, or they make some comments that reflect a lack of awareness about the relationship development piece. And I find it really helpful to talk with them a lot at the beginning about what's a reasonable thing to expect of themselves, and what what are we as instructors expecting of them as students, and really emphasizing that we don't expect them to have all of this mastered. We're not expecting them to come in and apply every single thing that they learned in every class. What we do expect is for them to be honest about times that they don't know, and to be honest about their own sense of confusion and anxiety and fear, and to kind of support them as we take a look at what some of the some of the self-talk and some of the expectations that they have for themselves that, probably are not conducive to them really doing the best job that they can do.
And that's really where the instructor's group facilitation skills and seeing the universality of the concerns and drawing out the quieter members of the internship or practicum class is probably more important than, like you said, covering technique A to get to problem B or solution C.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that often struggle with, especially at the beginning, but also throughout the year, is establishing and maintaining appropriate boundaries in relationships, not only with their clients, but with their coworkers and with other people in their lives, family members, and so on too. So as they're starting to figure out how to work with clients, they're also becoming more aware of boundaries in other relationships oftentimes. And so there's sort of a parallel process sort of thing that happens for students, and sometime around middle of the first semester, sometimes they'll come in and they'll be talking about expectations that family members have for them to be available for family events, but they're struggling with that because they have these school assignments, and I consider that to be completely appropriate material to be talking about in internship, because it all ties into who they are as people and how they learn to establish boundaries with people in their lives in a way that makes the job sustainable for them over time.
And it's really, I think it's even more important now because of our information explosion and the speed with which certain things happen, like, for example, in digital media, but life does not move at that speed. We have a kind of an unrealistic, everyone kind of thinks they can do everything at once. And as we know in counseling, developing the relationship takes time, and people have to learn to manage their time differently when they get into the depths of a prac or an internship.
Exactly. And then one other piece that comes up more so for some students than others, but is the idea about cultivating a helpful relationship with their site supervisor. So, and not all site supervisors have the same type of approach, of course, and some of them are more approachable than others. Some of them are more warm and nurturing than others, but regardless of what the site supervisor's approach is, it's an opportunity for ample learning on the student's part. And in fact, I think some of my students have learned the most when they've had difficulties with site supervisors, and we've had to work together to figure out a way to navigate through that. So I really emphasize with them what's their responsibility as a trainee, and what things can they bring to the interaction that will maximize what they're getting out of their meetings with their site supervisor. And then last but not least is the group process that's happening amongst the interns that you have sitting in that group. So often, not all of those groups are going to be getting along really well together. There might be one or two people in there who do some things that cause some discomfort, some noticeable discomfort, and in your role as a group leader, you want to kind of be monitoring the process of interactions among the interns in the group, and then managing that piece of it as those needs arise.
And I guess this is more of like a housekeeping issue, but I would also think it's really important for you to be clear about when you expect, for example, recordings, critiques, and not let a student get too backlogged.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's on the syllabus, but so they have to do 6 recordings or some type of a report of a recording over the course of the semester. So each student should be turning in a recording every other week. Those recordings really should be current, meaning that it should be a recording of somebody that they've worked with in the last week or two before that. It's not helpful to them for them to be giving you a recording in December from somebody that they were working with back in September, because a lot of learning has transpired since then. The feedback that you're giving them at that point might not even be timely anymore because they've moved past it. So so those recordings need to be current. And a lot of our students end up using the videos from CASC, from the Counseling and Academic Success Clinic,
Yes.
because they all have to serve a minimum of 2 hours per week at CASC. So, and one of the great advantages of having CASC is that we have access then to not only audio recordings, but actually video recordings. So we have additional data about their nonverbal behaviors that we can share with them, the nonverbals of either the client or the student counselor, either one.
Yeah, and that CASC requirement's only for the clinical counseling students, not for the school counseling.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so I think that's it for process. And then the last piece we just want to touch on briefly is site visits. So we are required, KCRIP requires program faculty to be having regular site contact with the site supervisors in order to make sure that we're providing continuity of instruction and that everybody's on the same page in our work with the students. And we recognize that for part-time instructors, it may be difficult, if not impossible, for you to actually get out to the sites for each of the places where your students are. So we've come up with a couple of alternative ways for you to do site visits.
Yes. And one is, you can use the technology and contact site supervisors by phone, use FaceTime or Zoom to consult with site supervisors. That's always an option.
Sure. You can also reach out to them by email. You will have all of their contact information from that site placement form. So an email is fine if you prefer to do it that way. I think probably on a first contact, a phone call, some type of a vocal interaction, I think is preferable. But, once you've made that initial contact, emails after that, I think are perfectly fine.
Yeah, if time permits and you can do a on-site visit, that's great. But if none of these are viable, you let Kathy know, and she, myself, or another full-time faculty will make the visit.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm more than happy to go out and be the representative for the program. So don't hesitate. If there's any way that I can help you with that, or you need any help with interacting or interfacing with a site supervisor, please let me know, because I'd be more than happy to help in any way that I can.
One more thing that just popped into my mind is students ask if they can stay at their sites in between semesters and do hours, and we recently got clarification that they in fact can do that, because especially clinical settings where they're billing via the CT status, they want them to stay on, or they might have some hours to make up.
Exactly. So to me, client care and continuity of care is by far the most important. And so the students really need to be discussing with their site supervisors what the agency or school's expectations are for how they're going to be there over the holidays and over the break in between semesters. So, for example, we have some internships that happen at college counseling centers that actually close down in between terms, and so it's not really even an option for the intern to be doing to be getting any hours in between fall semester and spring semester. But then there are other places where the placement site does expect the student to be there. So each of them needs to take responsibility for communicating about that with their site supervisor and making some arrangements that are mutually acceptable for everybody.
All right.
Okay.
So if you are teaching practicum and or internship for us, your parking lottery code is FR7236. Email me that code and we will know that you got to the end of the podcast and that you might win a free semester of parking.
Yeah, and good luck on that parking lottery thing. That's a great perk.
Yeah. And again, thank you for all that you do for our students and for taking the time to listen to or view this orientation.
Thanks.